initially trained as a painter, William Wegman is best known for his conceptually driven photographs and videos featuring dogs. An early adopter of video as an artistic form, Wegman continues to make work that is equally distinguished by its experimentation while simultaneously appealing to a broad audience. After adopting a Weimaraner named Man Ray in the early 1970s, he embarked on what he describes as a long and fruitful collaboration with the canine, featuring his dogs in humorous and often contrived scenarios. After Man Ray's death, Wegman's second dog, Fay Ray, and her offspring became the central characters of his work. Wegman's whimsical photographs of his Weimaraner dogs have been celebrated in the art world and enjoyed by pet lovers for nearly 4 decades. This entirely new volume presents more than 300 images from the artist's personal archive, unearthing previously unseen gems along with iconic images that have made Wegman, along with the dressed-up dogs Man Ray, Fay Ray, and others, beloved worldwide. Please welcome William Wegman.
Don't get up. Oh yeah, here we are. Yeah, well, one of the reasons that I photograph these dogs so much is, it's kind of like the Son of Sam. They made me do it. You know that story. Instead of being a psycho killer, I'm a psycho photographer. So. Yeah, it's been a long, very long history of photographing these dogs, but I want to start the talk with, before I got a dog, 4 or 5 images from the late 60s, early 70s, and I assume I just hit this. There it is. So this is the first photograph that I ever took that made me realize I could make photographs as art rather than whatever other reason you would take photographs for. Back then, not everyone had a cell phone, obviously, with a camera attached. So it was something you had to learn about, get up and do somehow. In this case, I was teaching at the University of Wisconsin, and I had one of my students teach me how to print and develop. That's one of the beauties of universities is you can tap into all of those resources. And I certainly did that with my students. I used them as my models sometimes and as my information. I wasn't a really good teacher, so I only taught for 3 years. And I had nothing else to do but move to New York and become a famous artist. So if I had become a good teacher, I would have still been at the University of Wisconsin, tenured and all of that. And so this started it all. I made this in Wisconsin when I was teaching there. And what appealed to me was the sort of circles. I had drawn little circles on my hand, and when I reached down into this cotto salami, my hand seemed to dissolve into it. So I stole these from the party and went home to my house and took this picture. And I actually did say, "Eureka." And from there, I started to make other photographs. And here's another example of a non-dog piece that's really about photography, isn't it? It's about trick photography, because certainly what happens after the middle frame isn't what happens in the last frame. Something far more amazing, but somehow it made a really nice picture, I think, and explained photography in a way to the masses. Here's another use of milk. Kind of a mistake use. 3 mistakes, this one's called. I used milk a lot because it photographed well, and my dogs liked it too, which as you can see there, rivets him in place. I didn't have to train him at all. I just had to place him, and then, of course, the hard thing was building the whole floor under him while he was there, and that took some time and some real artistry, but I managed it. And this is my first dog, Man Ray, at I think about 7 weeks. And he was a fat, tubby little Weimaraner, as I found out why months later when he pooped out a gigantic blue balloon. A beach ball, in fact. So, but he was, he thought of himself as a person rather than a dog. Let's see what else I got here. Oh, and there is him in old age. There he is, photographed with this unique camera called the Polaroid 2024, which takes pictures that are 24 inches vertically. At that time, instantly. Development time was about 70 seconds then. So I would kind of build these works. This was actually my very first color photograph. I just started out using black and white and didn't think color was something that I should be dealing with. But I felt since I painted his nails red, it would be a suitable first color photograph. And I titled this one Fay Ray, not realizing 15 years later I would name my next dog Fay Ray after Fay Ray. And other things with the Polaroid camera with Man Ray. The camera at that time was in Boston. I was living in New York, and so I would stay with a friend in Boston and use her props. She was working with styrofoam. I think that was one of her socks. So these pieces are kind of built on the spot. And this one's titled Bad Dog. And it was the last photograph I was ever able to take. Not true. And another kind of photograph that startled me because it's kind of kitschy. It's anecdotal, isn't formal. I don't know if it's art or not, but whatever, I took it, and there you have it. This was taken at a location in Rangeley, Maine, where I spend my summers and still do. Interestingly, there's a kid holding up the stuffed owl and another kid behind the house sticking that taxidermy deer head in. So these were lots of fun to make. And I imagine this would be a suitable last photograph of Man Ray. He was getting very old. This was on Kinnebago Lake in a canoe, and I really contemplated just launching it and then driving back to New York. And because it just seemed like it would be a good way to end it all. But I didn't. I rescued him, and in time for this picture, which is one of my favorites, I titled it Dusted. It's made with flour standing over him on a stepladder. And if you look closely, you can see these bronze stripes that I sprayed on his back, because I had been making him into a raccoon. And I had some flour to sprinkle on his nose just for some details, but the flour looked so great. I ended up climbing up on this ladder and having another person. A lot of these photographs weren't really taken by me, but I don't think that's a problem. Right, Jason? I take a very small percentage of my own pictures. And here is Fay in one of her really classic moments. She's like Pandora, I think, because it really did. After Man Ray died, I didn't photograph another dog for 5 years, or do much of anything for 5 years, as it turns out. I thought I was, but when I looked through everything, I really wasn't. So this is Fay Ray, and I love the way I love her look. She looked different from Man Ray. She was a thoroughbred, a real Weimaraner, not a pretend Weimaraner. And she could do some pretty crazy things. Getting her in front of this big camera in her youth gave me some possibilities I didn't have with Man Ray. And she also, unlike Man Ray, who was 6 weeks old when I first photographed him, Fay was practically a year. So, and she took to it as, the first time I got her was at 6 months, so I didn't start her off young. And so the camera is bigger than this podium here, quite a bit bigger, and the dog is in front of it, and I'm off to the side. So I'm here looking at Fay, who's there. And so I say, "Ready, Fay?" And when I say ready, she looks right into the lens. I don't know, somehow she knew how to do that. And this is the first, it's called Dressed for Ball. It's a good title. And it was the first dress dog thing I made, because I didn't want to do the anthropomorphic thing, but this was so weird and exciting that I said, and that led to this, which is the evil stepmother in my first children's book, Cinderella. She has her Joan Crawford look there. And then, how do I do this with one dog? Well, I don't. I get another dog. And how I did that is I bred Fay to Arco, a German dog in Maryland. That's a whole other story. A very exciting one because I had to photograph Barbara Bush at the White House, and it was before 9/11, so a German Shepherd got in on my Polaroid truck to check for bombs, not very carefully, and went over to my personal bag and started going crazy. And the guard said, "You have a sandwich in there?" And I said, "No, my dog was in heat," and I dropped her off in Virginia on the way to this event. So, and this is Fay's daughter, Bettina, who, this looks like Lolita, right? Of course, it's Lolita. Pretty sexy picture of a dog, I must say. And Batty is different from Fay as Fay was from Man Ray. She was narcoleptic, very long and careless, and really a wonderful, kind of a superstar. And there, as you can see by the next few pictures, she's really a spectacular dog. And every time I'd use the Polaroid camera, which was maybe a week out of a month, I forgot where I left off. So that's why I keep inventing so many new different movements. And this is the first day of her son's life, Chip. And 6 months later, he's playing the flute. So dogs, mature spectacularly, don't they? This dog, Chip, led to a lot of other children's books that I started to make, not with a Polaroid camera, but with my Hasselblad in a 2 1/4 format. And this is another sister of Batty, Fay's other daughter, Crookie, who is really a wonderful dog. I didn't have her, but she belonged to a friend of mine in Maine, and loved to work, as all the Weimaraners that I've had have liked to do. And then I thought of making a movie which I would title The Hardly Boys, as a parody of the Hardy Boys. So this is Chundo and Fay's #1 son with Batty in a scene from the Hardly Boys in an amphibious car. And it was really, really difficult to teach him how to drive. It's not like a simple car where you just press on it. There's so many other different features. So after the training period, we were able to do this. And this one is even harder, how to teach dogs to sail, because you get into a car, you press it, you start. But sailing a boat on a lake, believe me, is not easy. Right, Jason? I'm saying Jason because Jason is underwater there in a wetsuit, making sure the boat goes close enough to the dock where I had the giant Polaroid camera. Then I wanted to get, after all of this kind of narrative stuff, I wanted to get back to something that looked like art. I think I was criticized by someone saying that I was going down the wrong line. So I wanted to obey that, and I started to make things that look like art. Like this looks like Léger, correct? Am I right? Art majors out there, or art lovers? And another abstract picture using the 2 dogs with a Polaroid camera. You can see the Polaroid fuzz marks on top there. That's how they come out of the camera. And other fun things that are kind of formal. This is where I've turned them into rocks. The Weimaraners are really like, they sort of transcend themselves. Other fun things. This is Chip, who's a very handsome dog, I thought. And another dog who is really one of my assistants, Marlo. She had a dog, a very dark Weimaraner with yellow eyes. She named Mazzy. And Mazzy would work just once in a while, but really loved the strobe lights. So this is a picture, one of my favorite pictures that I made with her. And there's another one. You can see she's almost black. More of those trick things. And there's the cover of the recent book. This is Candy, one of the least photographed of all of my dogs. She usually found a way to make a really awful face in front of the camera. And I think the strobe lights bothered her. So I ended up using her in action a lot. This is her daughter, Penny. And this is my new dog, Flo, who's still with us. She's now 7. And this is not with a Polaroid camera, but with the digital stuff. And this is Flo's brother, Topper, who's a year and a half younger, half brother. This is kind of looked like some sort of electric connection, this picture. And then some flying stuff and some magic with candy. And that's the end of that talk. So now we're supposed to talk some more, right?
Talk some more.
All right.
Thank you. That was great. I think that was a great overview of this book, which is comprehensive in nature and a really great introduction or reintroduction, or if you're a longtime fan, it works for everyone. So, you know, obviously we've seen your beloved Weimaraners. Can you tell a little bit more about the breed, how you found the breed, and what it was like to popularize the breed?
Yeah. Well, I didn't get one to photograph. I got one because my first wife, Gail, the deal was we would get a dog when we moved to California from Wisconsin. So she wanted a short-haired dog, like a Dalmatian or something, and someone said, what about Weimaraners? And I had remembered seeing them, so there was an ad in the Long Beach paper, Weimaraners, $35. And so I went out to see this litter of Weimaraners, and I swear, I flipped a coin, because I still didn't want one, so I picked tails, and it was tails 5 times in a row. So we had to get that dog.
And now you're glad you did.
I did, yeah. And so I brought him back to the studio, and then I just started to do photo and video, so he was always in my studio, and of course I photographed him and made videos with him.
And you've popularized the breed too, and because of that, there's been a lot more.
Yeah, I was a little worried about that. In 1978, 8 years, when Man Ray was 8, I didn't photograph him for a year because I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be nailed to the dog cross. But now, you know, after he died and I started to photograph Fay, I accept it and actually cherish that. I think that I'm really lucky to have had this. Certainly embraced it totally with Fay and all of her offspring.
For sure. And so you've had 10, is that right?
I've had 10.
And you showed us, obviously, a lot of them have gone by from Man Ray and Fay Ray had all these offspring, and then now you have Flo and Topper.
That's right, who you met.
Who I have met and who are absolute delights. Can you tell us a little?
Some.
To me. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how their personalities have differed over, you know, you've had a lot of these dogs, you pick these dogs sometimes, you know, some you've inherited because of their family lineage, some you've actually worked with and picked. Can you tell us a little bit about your selection process and what their personalities are like?
Yeah. Well, certainly Man Ray being the first was somehow oddly memorable because and also him starting so young at 6 weeks. And he was my only dog too, so he didn't really like other dogs. And I think he thought of himself as a person. And he's the only dog that I've had that would try to figure out how to drive a car. I remember him looking at my feet, because he'd sit in the front. I had a pickup truck then. Look at my feet, and look at the wheel, and look at me. And once when I was developing photographs, he got the idea that cones were interesting. So he kept finding cones out of the kitchen and would bring, oh, this could be a good toy for us, Bill. So he kept thinking of things, and he was really, really demanding. He also emitted a high-pitched whine when I wasn't doing something with him, which really got under my nerves. Okay, we'll do something. So,
well, these dogs all love you. I mean, I've seen you work with them, and
every dog I've had, even though they've been very, very different, each group, one thing is they really love to work, and they love being in the studio. They just go down there very happily. And that's because I don't give them treats. It's just like a thing we do. And I think because they're working dogs, like a hunting dog, they like being around that kind of busy but not, you know how some people dress up their dogs for Christmas or birthday parties? I do it every day. So, you know, it's kind of their job, and they take it differently.
How do you feel about that? So there's the Halloween dog parade in New York, and now there's a lot of Instagram famous dogs. There's menswear dog, and a lot of people are using Instagram as a way to make their dogs famous. You kind of started that whole thing. How do you feel about how that's evolved?
What is Instagram anyway? So I don't know how to go on any of those things, but people have told me that you should put your stuff on Facebook, and I don't know how to do it, but I have
I can help.
Yeah, I have people that do it for me, and you can help me too.
Yep.
So I think it's good. I love showing my work, and I love having an audience. You know what made me so happy was my dogs were on Sesame Street.
Yes.
And a long time ago, 20 years ago, and when I bike the dogs through the so-called projects down 18th Street, further down, I hear people say, hey, those TV dogs, or Sesame Street, or, you know, these kids are like 20 years old, and they have that. It makes me feel really good.
It's amazing,
like
and
that.
You do bike with them. That's how they get walked. So
Yeah.
these dogs have a very active life.
Well, they do. They have to keep them in good shape. There's nothing worse than a fat, ugly Weimaraner. Sorry if you happen to have one, but you have to keep them.
So this book it's really interesting how it came to be, and it's amazing to see all of these photographs together. You had to go through a lot of archives. You have a lot of pictures. You've showed us even a sampling here. What was that like emotionally to go back through this long history of 4 or 5 decades to select 300 pictures to put in this volume?
Yeah, well, I kind of forgot what I was doing. I would rent the camera, as I said, for a few days at a time, or sometimes for a project or whatever. And then I'd put them away in these archival boxes and forget about them. Certain ones would be rephotographed with a 4x5 camera at the time, and those would be used for calendars or an occasional book. But the huge percentage of them were just stored, put in storage in these boxes. And then one day, Jason, who's over there, said, we should, you know, take a look at these. And it was pretty amazing. There's so many things that I forgot that I did, directions that had dropped off. Also, the emotional thing was we worked rephotographing them digitally backwards. So I could see the dogs getting younger and younger, and then before they were born, and another one. It was very emotional seeing the curve of these 10 dogs.
And speaking of how you've selected sort of all of these scenes over the years, and you've put them in boats, you've done all these very complicated things. So what inspires you? So you've talked a little bit about art history and how you went back to art history, but when you go, okay, what's the next concept? What's the next? Because this book is organized thematically. So how does that come to you? How do these different sort of scenes and costumes?
Well, for a while it was children's books, and that was fun for a while until it became not fun for a while. And then I always loved putting my dogs, getting them up, you know, they're used to that through the Polaroid camera, which you had to raise up to that level. So I get used to having them on things, and it's a way of keeping them there too. It's, you know, once you get them up, getting down is more complicated. So they wait for me to lift them up and put them on things.
They don't startle really. I mean, I've seen you work with them.
Yeah,
most dogs would be running.
Well, you know, they're not afraid, and I don't put them up on things they don't like. So if something bothers them, the last thing you want is that look. So I avoid that. So we keep the studio calm.
There's a lot of trust.
Yeah, there's trust, and you don't yell, and you just, you know, okay, you don't want to do that, we'll do something else. But the funny thing happened. My wife, who you met, Christine, got completely sick of this crappy furniture I would drag off the street to use as props, and our house was just full of it. So she thought, what if we use some really great stuff that we get from Eames or Herman Miller or one of these places? So she started to bring these things in, and that led to a whole new, because it suddenly had colorful, bright, interesting props, and that led to a show called Good Dogs on Nice Furniture. And that was kind of, that was a pretty recent thing. But then late spring, French Vogue asked me to do some dogs with all of these designer clothes. And we did that, and that was spectacular. I had people making wigs for them, and really I thought dressing up dogs wasn't going to work because of Photoshop. It just sticks a head on and photoshops it in, but no, there's a way to work with it so you really know theatrically the dogs are cooperating.
And you don't Photoshop. These dogs are...
No, I might clean up some gunk or something from around the edge, but I never stick their heads on stuff.
That's pretty amazing. So speaking of dressing them up, kind of making them taller, this book is called Being Human. What does it mean to be human? You've mentioned that Man Ray thought he was a person.
Yes.
So what does that mean? And in the context of this book, what does it mean to be human?
It's a title that the real author of the book, or producer, Bill Ewing, does he go by William Ewing, I guess? He thought of it, and I didn't really like it at first. And then I thought, okay, well, it's okay. I'm not sure if it's okay. But all of the different categories that we ended up using made it really interesting, that there's dogs as human people, there's dogs as, lots of other things.
Right, right. That's very cool. And I think a lot of people do think of their pets as part of their family, as having very human qualities.
Yeah, until I had my own kids, though, I realized that they're different. Dogs are different from children.
In what ways?
In a lot of ways. Their college is a lot cheaper. Yeah, I don't know, I mean, I care about them as much, but when they don't call, although that's similar when they're lost. Some of my dogs used to wander for hours and eventually come back. I mean, they're hunting dogs. They would just go and go and go. But yeah, it's similar but different.
What were some of these photos seem super complicated, like you were talking about the boat. What are some of these scenes that have just been so difficult to execute? Because
I can't believe I bothered to do some of these things. They're so hard. Like, I don't work as hard now, but I used to. And when you have something so expensive and so formidable as the Polaroid 2024 camera, which you import with a Ryder truck, you have generators, light banks, assistants. You're spending $10,000 a day, you get attention. You just go, and I just used to use it as though it was 35 millimeter, click, 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 even though it was $50 every time you go click. So it was pretty amazing. And I'm really glad that I used that camera, but I'm really happy now that I'm not anymore. It's very difficult.
And what are you using now?
I use, Jason, what do I use now?
A Hasselblad.
And?
Digital back.
Yeah. What's the digital back, do you know?
It's Hasselblad.
Yeah. That's what I use.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Switching gears a little bit. So you mentioned a couple of projects, Sesame Street, Vogue. That's a wide range, and it's made you widely known everywhere. What projects stick out that you've absolutely loved? How do you find these projects? How do these projects come to you? And what's that been like to be invited to do all of these really interesting things?
I think probably the first children's book with the Polaroid camera were kind of amazing. It led to a direction I didn't think I could have gone into, but did, and I showed a couple pictures from there, notably the evil stepmother. But I also did Little Red Riding Hood, and that interested me because of the animal transformation, the grandmother dog thing with my dogs. That made sense. With Cinderella, had the idea of adoption appealed to me, because you adopt a dog, you're either its fairy godmother or evil stepmother. Dogs are usually sent away someplace and adopted, so that seemed to be a nice way to do that. Plus I had a cast, I had a whole family, mother, Fay, daughter, Batty, other son being both the wolf and the prince in those books. So I had a cast of family actors,
right?
Acting troupe. So
you had a whole troupe.
Yeah, a whole troupe. So doing all of these books, I made maybe about 12 children's books.
I know, I had them all. So.
Yeah, it was really fun to do.
That's awesome. And so you've done sort of a lot of these really popular culture sorts of things that has exposed you to so many people. But you're a fine artist by practice. Your postcard paintings.
Thank you.
Your postcard paintings are amazing. I'm a big fan of those. And I was sort of hoping you could tell us a little bit about what that was like to sort of reconcile doing these really sort of popularized commercial projects with your fine art practice and your training and your and your love of
Well, you
painting?
have to realize that in the 60s, painting was being attacked. It was dead. And so I turned to, not because someone told me to, but I found myself interested in video, which was available in a portable format for the first time when I was teaching in Wisconsin. And also the idea of using a camera. So that was really, I think, advanced in a way and pioneering, so to speak. But painting, which the reason I went to art school is because I love to draw and paint. Hey, you should go to art school. You're a really good artist. So I went to art, found out painting was not really it. And in grad school, started to work with, I had a grant with computer, with a biological computer lab, working with engineers, making interactive environments and machines. That seemed like it was really advanced. Painting seemed like it was so 19th century and so passé. And then I found myself not around a big university, but just in my studio, and I said, I really miss painting. It was something that I really loved doing. So secretly, I started doing it again. I didn't show anyone. In fact, I painted my first painting on the back of one of those stretchers there, and then leaned it against the wall. And the painting was of, it had a telephone wire broken in it, which means no one can tell anyone that I'm painting. So it was kind of a secret, sheepish enterprise. But each year I sort of advanced it until one year I said, nah. So I stopped for about 5 years and I started again. And now it's just part of me. I've probably been painting as long as anything. And some people, like yourself, do know me as that.
For sure. And I think that was a great transition about you being a pioneer, because one of the other projects that you have currently up is at the Met, and you and your wife have given 174 of your early video works, which have been described as pioneering works of the 1970s and video art. And it's an amazingly generous gift. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think the videos are perceived today versus when you made them, and what that journey has been like to now see them collectively at the Met.
Well, sure. I think I was, the gift thing, I was just really happy they wanted it.
Yeah.
Like, really? Okay. So I'm really thrilled, and they did an amazing job installing that work, I thought, the video especially. But when I first started to make it, I knew that it was good. And the reason I knew it is when I went to edit it, technicians would stop and look at it. It was riveting. Yeah. And my parents would like it. And my parents' uncles, who didn't like anything, liked it. And so it drew people in. I wasn't sure if the art world would like it. In fact, some didn't. I remember Joel Shapiro, a friend of mine now, first time he saw it, I gave a talk at Pratt. I hate humor in art. And, I do too, but not mine. I hate everyone else's. I think it's stupid. But mine was somehow okay, don't you think?
I totally think
Yeah.
so. And there, they talk a lot in the show about this sort of East Coast and West Coast, almost rivalry in what was happening in the art of the 70s. Did you really feel that? And what was going on? You were on the West Coast at that time.
I didn't feel that at all. I was just, the work I was doing was from Wisconsin and video, and then suddenly I was an LA artist because the timing was so perfect, I think. There were other artists that were working similarly, and so I was in all of these shows called, the first one was 24 Young LA Artists, 11 LA Artists. And, the work was just like in 1 week in LA. So it seemed to be to say something about LA, and that's fine. And then when I moved to New York 3 years later, I guess I was still an LA artist for a really long time, and I might still be.
That's so funny.
But I'm a Massachusetts artist. That's where
you're from. And
yeah, when I was 5 years old, and my parents said, "Oh, there's," or my uncles would say, "How's Billy the artist?" My parents would say, "He's upstairs drawing pictures." So that's the way it started.
And now you're a neighborhood local of the Google office here in Chelsea.
Yeah.
You've been in Chelsea a long time, and not so much in LA, even though that might be your your former reputation.
Yeah.
So what's this neighborhood change been like, and watching that? You've
Yeah,
been here a
well,
long time.
someone wrote a book about 18th Street, and they said when we moved in, the whole neighborhood changed. And not dramatically because of me, but it did 23 years ago, or 2 years ago, was when Chelsea really started to, all of this, the empty lots started to go this way. Then there was the High Line, and then you guys. And how long have this place been here?
Think about 12 years, something
Yeah.
like that.
So,
Fact check me there.
pioneer again.
Pioneers
Yeah.
of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We're happy you're here, and it's nice because
yeah, it
people
is
do
good.
see you walking and biking along with
Yeah,
the
no,
dogs.
it's really good here.
Cool. I'm going to also invite anybody who has a question up to the microphone so you can start thinking about your questions. And we'll take some questions from the audience too. Don't be shy. But I will continue. I have more
Okay.
questions.
Mm-hmm.
So another project you're working on is with RX Art.
Mm-hmm.
RX Art is a fantastic organization that puts contemporary art into children's hospitals.
Yeah.
And does fabulous projects. And you have a project that is opening in Flint, Michigan.
That's right. Pretty soon. We found a way to make these pictures. Jason, what's the name of the material we're using on these photographs that's going to be in Flint? Infused something or other? Yeah, it's an amazing process where the photographs of the dogs can be made and you can publicly, and they're archival, and they won't get damaged, and it's also, I've done other projects RX related in hospitals. I went to a cancer unit in Washington for kids, and it was just spectacular seeing them enjoy the work. And this trip I'm going to be doing art projects with them. So the pictures will be on the walls in the hospital, and I'll do stuff with the kids.
Very nice
with
way
the dogs.
to
So
give
it's
back.
a
Oh, the
wonderful
dog's
thing.
coming too?
No, but me and the dog's pictures. So, yeah, they'll be able to make their own William Wegmans if they want, or whatever else they want to make.
That's awesome.
So-
Okay, we'll take a question from over here.
Yes, hi there.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming.
welcome.
My question is in regards to the actual photographing of the dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had any specific tricks, you mentioned that you didn't use treats when photographing your dogs. So I was
Yeah.
wondering if you had any specific tricks, or if you held up stuffed animals or dog
Sure,
toys, or
yeah.
how the dog really stayed still for so long.
Every group and every dog has had a different requirement. Two of them have been really into balls. They just hold the ball up, and suddenly, Fay in particular, or Man Ray, but Chip, Batty's son, you could toss him the ball and it would bonk off his head, or you go, "Why are you doing that?" It was almost like, ooh. So I had to think of different things. I don't use food generally because I don't like lurching and drool. I like more just a composure. The hardest thing, though, is in the videos where I had to get, let's say, 4 dogs doing 4 different things. Because you call one dog, you go, "Fay," and all 4. "What do you want with Fay?" So I did something really unique with that. Is I would talk through tubes to throw my voice during the filming, to have my voice come out in different ways. And another trick I did was we filmed one shot in a building that had roofs that went in different directions. I had somebody throw gravel on, and it would roll down in different ways, so the dogs would react, and that was very effective. But yeah, in the films, getting 2 dogs to do 2 different things is a super challenge. For photography, sometimes it's with one dog. If I just hide, then he'll look for me, and that's with Topper. He gives a really great look. Like, where'd he go? In the movies, again, I can talk about this for the whole 2 hours. In the movies, there's one dog had to play an evil character and a nice character. For him to look evil, I walked far away from him, and he would squint, and he'd look like a bad guy. And then to have the good character go really close, because he liked me, and he'd look at me like that. So that's how I changed his personality, by proximity. There's also a lot of different things with angle, like a dog photographed slightly below looks kind of stupid. They look smarter when you go like this, because they get more cranium. Dogs that have their ears that go this way, like Batty, look very smart because that makes their head bigger. And if they're like this, then there's all these different angles that you have to explore.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hi. Also, thanks for coming the same way.
Welcome.
The first time I came to New York, I think it was about 2001, I really remarked on how many Weimaraners there were around. I thought it made New York seem very fancy. Like all these people had cooler, prettier dogs than the rest of the world. And when I finally moved here, I guess about 10 years later, I really felt like I had passed the age of the Weimaraner. They just weren't around anymore. Is that just my perception, or have they really gone out of fashion? And if so, do you know why?
I don't know how to answer that question. There's a few in my neighborhood, and people will say, "Oh, I saw you walking your dogs the other day," and no, I was not around, and I'm the only one that walks them. So I know there's someone with 2 Weimaraners. There's one guy that had a Weimaraner. He's from Iran, and his dog. He and his dog were in Iran. You're not allowed to have a dog in Iran. The dog learned to be quiet and hide. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Yeah. So I met this guy. He's a painter.
Did you ever think about being a dog trainer? I mean, you
I'm
have better
terrible
tricks.
at training. My dogs are, ask anybody, right? My dogs are really untrained, but in the studio, they're good.
Very good. That's amazing how that works.
It's amazing, but it's true.
So we have a dog-friendly culture here. As you can see, do you think Flo and Topper would make good Google dogs, given that you said they're not well-trained? Do you think...
They'd be, Flo would be in the restaurant. Wouldn't leave that alone. And Topper would be after these little dogs here, but in a friendly way. He loves other dogs.
He does.
Yeah.
He carries his blanket around.
He does. He nurses on it. He's a child. Yeah.
And another question, please.
Hi. You mentioned when you started off in art school, you were a painter.
Yes.
I was kind of interested in learning more about kind of sort of what you were sort of other artists you were looking at when you were sort of younger, and sort of. So I know that like around the time when sort of you were talking about how you moved to video and sort of the art world was kind of moving in a different direction. So I just kind of wanted to learn more about that.
Well, I went to art school first in Boston, Mass College of Art, and at that time in 1961. It was sort of the tail end of abstract expressionism and third generation and all of that. And so the more advanced artists like Frank Stella and so forth were doing these sort of hard-edged paintings that I think they were called. And there was a show that I saw at the Brandeis Museum of Stella, those black paintings, that was very influential to me. And I started to become, I suppose, a minimal artist. And then when I went to grad school of Illinois in the mid-'65, I kept doing that for a while, but then I quit painting altogether and started to make these interactive environments, way over my head scientifically. But I sort of like to follow that. But artists that I liked were like, besides Stella at the time, were Bruce Nauman. I thought was pretty amazing. He was one of the first video people. So. The reason I moved to LA rather than New York after I didn't get rehired as a teacher in Wisconsin was Al Ruppersberg, a really amazing artist that's about my age, and he had a presence in LA. So I moved to LA hoping to meet him, and I ended up meeting him and Ed Ruscha and Baldessari and a lot of the really well-known LA artists. And there was a whole group of artists there that I became friends with that were, not quite so well known, but yeah.
You're a big hockey player, is that right?
I'm a little hockey player, but I love hockey player. I do, and it's close to the Chelsea Piers here, and that's a really good thing for me. It really is my social life in a way, because I don't go to parties or drink or anything like that. I just, have the locker room.
Have you dressed the dogs up as hockey players yet?
I did once, yeah, in a brown, a friend of mine who went to Brown, I dressed one of my dogs up in a brown hockey gear. And then my son, who just arrived, went to Brown, and that's a dirty word here. So, yes.
Hi, thank you again for coming. You're one of the first photographers I can remember being a fan of when I studied
Yeah.
photography in college. And I was wondering if there was ever if you faced any resistance or criticism of accepting your work with the dogs as art because they're dogs or because they're
Yeah.
dressed up.
Certainly. That's been, in fact, the first head of MoMA was, I guess, Sarkovsky, and he wasn't really a big fan of my work. It's more, more like real photography rather than this. And I can sort of understand that. I don't like a lot of my work too. So, but some stuff just comes through in spite of myself, and that I think drives me in a way. But when I first did photographs, I didn't want to be known as a photographer at all. I thought that was a bad word, being a photographer. So, but my first dealer, Sonnabend, had an amazing collection of photographs, real photographs, and I gradually became came to know it and really like it. But some people don't like my work because I'm abusing the dogs. That's certainly not true. Anyone who's seen me work, as you have.
Oh, yes.
Whether they think the dogs are being not nobly projected, that's another thing. Or if they don't like the work, that's fine. But to think that they're abused is not good. It's not right.
Thank you.
Cool. So my last question is, you have a show coming up sort of in conjunction with this book that's touring, and that's very exciting and going all around the world. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that and whatever else is sort of next for you and what we can expect to see from you and Flo and Topper.
Yeah, well, there's also coming up, there's a show coming up at the Met Metropolitan Opera Gallery of the Cinderella pictures in a couple of weeks. So that's around the corner, and it's nice to see those reprised in a way. So I'm happy about that. I love music, so that's good. It's going to be at the same time that the Cendrillon is playing. The big show coming up in Arles has many of the pictures that are in this Being Human book, and it's going also to Melbourne and some other places.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being
Welcome.
here. Books are available for sale in the back, and please check out Being Human. And if we can give a round of applause for Bill for being here.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so